recently JoJo Part 9 happened. It finally started. We finally, after like a year and a half, we finally got the first chapter to Part 9, the JoJo lands. And that's really cool and all. So, to celebrate, I'm going to be reviewing Chapter 1 of Phantom Blood, the first chapter of JoJo. So if you were following my Twitter for like any length of time, you might have seen that I did this thing where I did like a chapter. I reviewed like a chapter of Part 2 Battle Tendency like every day, and I kind of stopped for a lot of reasons. Cause like first of all, I was spending like an hour, 1 to 2 hours, just writing out the review of the chapter, getting my thoughts out, doing the damn alt text. That was awful. So I'm trying something a little different now. I'm gonna try to keep doing this daily if I can. We'll see how that goes. Maybe it'll work. Who knows? I'm wanting to keep this like relatively low effort. Like, not terribly low, but you know what I mean. You know what I mean. I just want to be able to get these done on a mostly daily basis without getting burnt out like I did last time. And so I thought, you know what? I'm going to start at the start this time, because starting at Part 2 was awful. I'll get to my opinions with Part 2, but I feel like it's really hard to like get into Part 2 if you're just jumping straight into it and like you didn't just read all of Part 1. I feel like Part 2 is better enjoyed as a complement to Part 1. But speaking of Part 1, I love this part. Part 1 is amazing. It is easily my most revisited part of the series, both anime and manga. From what I understand, that's a bit of a minority opinion, but I don't care. Part 1 clears. It is amazing. I want it to have my kids. So, before I get into the first chapter, in my thoughts on what this first chapter is and how it's good, I just want to say my thoughts on the Part 1 of JoJo's in general. So, I like it, as I said. It's a very short story, especially compared to the later parts, but I feel like, for the most part, it uses its limited time really well. It's a very short but sweet story. It doesn't feel like it skips many beats. The one thing I have to complain about would probably be Zappelli as a character, because like it's basically like, hello, I exist. Oh, I'm dead now. It's like we barely got any time with this guy. He seemed kind of interesting, but we barely got any time with him. It's like they expect us to feel sad over it. Like, okay, sure. I'm sure Jonathan and Zappelli's relationship was very cool and all, but we didn't see it. No, but I do like the part. I think it has some pretty strong theming, actually, and especially with like the whole good versus evil thing. Because I mean, you could argue that pretty much every part of JoJo has the good versus evil thing going on, but I really like how Part 1 does it. It's very black and white in like its portrayal of good and evil. Like, Jonathan is like ultra good, Dio is like ultra bad, and they kind of just stay in those two camps. But like, to me, it doesn't really make the story that boring. I really like how Araki tells this story. It keeps me engaged pretty well, especially like the first little third of it, like everything from the beginning to the mansion fight was like peak JoJo's. a lot of people agree with me on that. The middle kind of sucks because Dio's not there. We don't really get to see any Jonathan and Dio stuff. Then at the end, we see more Jonathan and Dio stuff, and life's good. But I like it. I know I keep saying that. I like it a lot. One thing I've noticed, because I actually just reread part 1 just a few months ago. There's a theming thing that I don't really notice a whole lot of people talking about, mainly involving courage, and this is a thing that gets introduced as first as the first chapter. So we're gonna get into this a bit later, but throughout the whole part, there's basically this theme of courage and standing strong in the face of overwhelming adversity, and which I just really vibe with a lot. Like, for example, the first fight with Dio in the mansion after he's a vampire, Jonathan's got shit. He's just a regular, puny human, no hormone. All he really has to rely on are his wits, his physical ability, and his knowledge of the mansion he grew up in. And, he is not afraid. He is full-on prepared to die trying to kill Dio. And, any normal reaction, even Speedwagon is afraid. Any normal reaction to that would be, oh shit, this guy's a vampire, we're fucked. But Jonathan, with, zero anything, is nah, I'm gonna try to stop this guy. And, it's a lot of stuff like that. It shows up again later. It shows up a bit before. But I really love part 1 for that. And those are my thoughts of the part going in. I don't really think they're gonna change that much, because I've looked at this part so many times. I feel like my opinions on other parts are gonna change a lot more, because the plan's gonna be do a chapter review a day, and part of the reason I want to do it that way is to kind of sort of simulate the feeling of reading these chapters as if they were releasing weekly. Now, I won't do full weekly for the full experience, because that'll just take way too damn long, but I feel like roughly 1 chapter a day, it would be a good simulation, because I'm still having to wait to see what happens next, or I guess more accurately to say, wait to re-experience the next chapter. But I'm interested to see how my perspective of the story in general will change. I also really want to comment on the series from a design perspective, because I do have a good bit to say even within this first chapter. And I'm really excited to get into it. A lot of these are thoughts that I've just thought in passing, at work when I'm not doing much. I'll think about, oh hey, this is pretty cool thing about this story that I've hyper fixated on for years of my life now, and I finally get to share that with you. It's so exciting. And when I tried it with part 2 last summer, I definitely noticed that a little bit. I kind of got a different perspective of the Santana fight in part 2, and how it just kind of drones on. But we'll get to that when we get to that. For now, we got part 1, chapter 1, prologue. Yeah. So we open up. We got a human sacrifice. Lovely. First few pages are in full color. That's always nice. I always like the colored pages when they're colored by hand rather than the digitally colored ones. It looks a lot more natural to me. I feel like the colors mesh with the original drawing a lot better that way. Maybe it's because Araki did it. I don't know. But yeah, so we got a human sacrifice. The literal first thing in this series we see is this dude just kill this woman, and it's wow, what a start. And you see he's got a stone mask on. And he uses the blood to put on the mask. And he's wearing the mask, and it like activates. He got the spikes coming out, and he becomes a vampire. It's like eternal life is mine. And then he takes that so-called eternal life. He finds a follower right next to him, and he just takes that life from him. And it's like that's not even eternal life at that point. You're just taking life from other people. You're selfish. You're selfish, and you don't even realize it. He's like, oh wow, this stone mask has given me the power of a true ruler. It's like, okay, well if you're such a good ruler, then why did your civilization collapse, huh? Yeah, that's what I thought. So this little prologue scene did not exist in the anime. I'm kind of torn on their decision to do that. Because, like, on the one hand, having this prologue, it kind of explains away at least some of the mystery of the stone mask. Like, if you're watching this in the anime, the first time you see the stone mask is when Dario is trying to rob George the First. And it's like, oh wow, what's this stone mask? And you kind of get to learn alongside Jonathan and Dio what it does, and that's kind of cool. But here, it's like, oh, we know what it does, kind of, sort of. It lets you steal life force from people and be really strong. And like, sure, that's not everything. But at the same time, it does provide a bit of historical context within the universe, because we kind of get to see a day, or rather a night in the life of these Aztecs who use the stone mask, and it is kind of cool. I don't know, maybe they could have included it, maybe they could have just had it later in the story or something. I don't know, kind of a double-edged sword. But yeah, that's the prologue of the prologue. It takes up roughly like a third of the chapter. And by the way, I'm reading the Viz Media English translations because I'm a shill. Well, I mean, I've mainly read like the fan translations of like the colored scans. That's how I read most of the series when I initially read it a few years back. And I kind of wasn't a fan of like all of the translations of that. Some of it just didn't really flow well. Like, I really like the Viz translation for part 1. It feels really cohesive. I know I loved the dub of part 1 because it actually felt like you were in 19th century Britain, and it was really cool that way. But anyways, we cut to where Dario's like, hey Dio, get your bitch ass over here and listen to me. And something I want to comment on is just the inconsistency of the scar that's on Dario's forehead, that comical Stitch-looking scar. And it's just like some shots he just doesn't have it, other shots he does. Some shots, there's something there. You can't really make out if it's like a scar or just like how his skull is shaped or whatever. But it's something. And he's handing the letter to Dario, and for some reason, until now, I never really got the idea to try and read what it says. It looks like it says, George Joestar, Balustrius Estope, 225 Rarapol. Yeah, the words, English. It kind of just seems like Araki threw English letters together that kind of resembled words. I don't know. Whatever. And so, another thing I want to comment on is just like, so we see Dario's hand reaching towards Dio, and it's got, you just put some fucking squiggly lines on his hand to simulate his body hair. And it looks really comical. I'm just noticing now when he shows the letter, you can see the same thing on his chest. it looks kind of just cartoony, I guess. Like, to be fair, a lot of his early artwork kind of looks cartoony in a sense, especially like earlier part one. But yeah, he tells the story of the carriage and how it fell and how he stole money from a rich noble. And this carriage looks really good. It's a really detailed carriage. Like, a lot of the background elements in part one look really detailed. Like, the characters themselves might not look as detailed, but a lot of the background does. It's kind of cool. It kind of feels a bit natural that way. And, yeah, I was going down there, whoop-de-whoop-de-whoop, and there's the dead guy. Oh, no. And he steals the ring, and he's looking at the spooky mask. He's like, oh, whoa, a creepy mask. No thanks to this one. And that's another example of what I was talking about with, like, the Viz Media translation quality, because in, like, the colored scan that I read, it was like, what was it? Spooky mask. I don't want it. That wording just feels really dull compared to, what's this creepy mask? No thanks to this one. Like, that feels kind of whimsical. The other one is just straight boring. And there's a bit more of that. And, yeah. So, he does the thing. I also like to comment more on the inconsistency of Dario's scar. So, in this flashback, he's wearing a top hat, right? And it kind of looks to me like Araki was kind of relying on the top hat to not have to draw the scar on Dario's forehead. Because there's a lot of scenes where he's wearing it, and, like, it'll be positioned a certain way or whatever. And, like, you should, in theory, be able to see it, but there's just no scar there. So, I don't know. Shame on you, Araki, from almost 40 years ago for not being consistent. Haha. And yeah, not Jonathan. George the First is like, oh, you saved me. Are my wife and kid okay? He's like, no. Oh, okay. Thanks anyway. I'll give you a favor later. Cool, thank you. And then we cut back to the present. A manga only detail that is not in the anime is that Dario actually used some of that money he got from George to, like, start his own hotel. Or no, well, it says a bar in this translation. I guess he went to start a bar, but it didn't work out. So now he is kind of stuck. Which is interesting. I don't know, I guess the anime wanted to make him look more bad. Because, like, he totally is. He's very abusive. He's a drunk, and like, this little tidbit shows that, okay, maybe he kind of sort of tried. I don't know. Maybe they just thought if they included it in the anime, it would be a little confusing for his characterization. But whatever. Next panel, the coloring kind of makes it look like he's younger than he is for some reason. I'm not sure why they decided to do it this way. When, like, looking at past panels, they just didn't color his hair in. Well, they did here. I don't know what that's about. But yeah, it makes him look like he's in his 30s. Whatever. So we cut to this deal. It's like, ooh, I hate you, Dad. You suck. He spits on his grave. And in the manga, another manga only thing, we got this page explaining the 19th century and the Industrial Revolution. I guess kind of like to get the audience more in the mindset of what life was like for those people back then. And, like, it explains that a lot of people wanted to get rich because that was the popular thing. Destroying the planet so you could get rich was what everyone wanted. And it shows this really funny panel of a lot of goofy characters just like, I don't know. They're happy about something. I love this guy with the cane back here. He looks like a fucking wizard magician dude who's just like, oh yeah. We're all screaming, shouting at this thing. And it's like we don't even know what it is. It's just really weird. And then we got the stuff with Arena and the bullies. And they're bullying her. They got the doll. And then Jonathan's like, hey, stop it. Stop it, you two. Give her the doll back. They're like, whoa, what are you going to do about it? It's like, well, I'm going to beat you up. And he tries to beat him up. But he's too young. They're too old. And so they beat him up back. They're like, oh, wow, you got your ass kicked, huh? Hey, you wouldn't happen to be this really rich dude who lives nearby, would you? The Joe Stars? You wouldn't have to be a Joe Star, would you? Huh? And then Jonathan pulls out the handkerchief that has his name, Jonathan Joe Star, on it. And there's this one panel, which, first of all, the napkin's kind of like going outside of the border of the panel, which is kind of cool. But his teeth, they're doing this really, it's this weird, like, comical looking thing where it's like an oval and you just got lines across it. It always looks like really cartoony to me every time I look at it. Really cartoony. They're like, oh, well, since you're actually rich, we're gonna beat the crap out of you even more. And they do that. And something I want to mention real quick before I get too ahead of myself. So everyone knows JoJo for fashion, right? Like all these characters are just ripped out in the wildest clothes, and like, so a lot of the fashion in earlier parts is really toned down compared to what comes later. But like, it's still good fashion, I would call it. Like, take what Jonathan's wearing in this scene. Like, it looks very traditional. It's very much what you would expect from a rich white boy living in London. But he's got style. He's got that blazer. It's got like a vest. Looks like leggings or like long socks or whatever the hell that is. I don't know. I mean, it would be weird if he didn't have the drip because he's rich. But it's cool that he does. And he looks cool in it. But anyways, that happens. Arena goes to, like, make sure he's okay. Jonathan kind of acts a little bit like a dick here. He like, slaps at her hand as she's trying to help him. It's kind of like sexist in a way. And he's like, get out of here. I didn't go after them nor to get thanked by you. He's like, I want to be a true gentleman. You were a woman in trouble. There are times when gentleman has to be courageous and fight, even when his opponent is bigger than he is and he knows he's going to lose. But one day, we'll be able to beat them. And that's kind of relates to the courage theming stuff I was talking about. And I'm glad it so concisely words that within the first chapter, because that's how you know it's going to be important later. And it really does a good job at describing Jonathan's character, because that's like literally what he does the whole part. He's like, oh, well, I don't care if I'm going to lose. I know that my pride as a gentleman will not remain intact if I don't act. So he acts. And here he gets his ass kicked. But later he acts and he doesn't get his ass kicked. And it's like he says, well, one day he'll be able to beat them. And thankfully the manga excluded this next little tidbit that I'm going to complain about for a second here. Arena has this inner soliloquy thing where she's like, why did he take his handkerchief out of his pocket? They couldn't have attacked him so forcefully had they not known his name. He must have done it in order to become a true gentleman, like he was talking about. And it flies in the face of show don't tell. Because the anime gets it. The anime gets it perfectly well. It doesn't explain it away to you as if you're too stupid to understand. It lets you think for yourself and think, okay, this kid, maybe he's kind of dumb, but he has his principles. He has his morality. He really believes in what he's fighting for. And here it kind of explains some of that away, and it also brings your attention. Oh, wait, well, if you go back, he brought his handkerchief out, and that's how the kids knew he was rich, and he didn't need to do that, but he did it anyways. And it's all just stuff that is best left to the audience to think for themselves, rather than have like an audience sit-in character explain it to them as if to say, oh, this is what you should be thinking about right now. And it shouldn't be that way. It should be more open-ended. It totally should. But anyways, moving on. I really love how the horses are drawn here. They're very cool. I love the carriage and the what do you call that? What do you call those guys? The carriage driver? The horseman? I think it's horseman. Whatever, that guy looks cool. That whole panel just looks really cool. And it's really nice. Like, a lot of people conflate, like, Araki's early artwork with being bad. Well, this isn't necessarily the case. There's a lot of good art in the first few parts, even if it is a little inconsistent at times. But yeah, Dio pops out, and he is also wearing the drip, which is a little... In universe, it's a little weirder, because he shouldn't have money for drip. He's poor. He should look poor. I don't know, maybe George wired him some money so he wouldn't have to embarrass the Joestars by arriving there in shabby rags or whatever. But yeah, he's got like these striped sock legging things. He's got this bow tie thing. He's got a undervest. He looks really, really good. And they meet each other, and there's these two panels I want to bring to your attention real quick. For design. So, it's like the border of the panel is kind of like mirroring the two faces across from each other. It's not perfect, but you get the general idea. Like the stature Jonathan has, it's like the same stature that Dio has, but it's like mirrored across the plane, if that makes sense. And I feel like these two panels really show you how different these characters look and how their appearance is so contrasting. Because, like, Dio has bright hair, it's blonde, but like it's like an orangish here, whatever. Jonathan is dark hair. Dio has almond-shaped eyes. Jonathan has, like, round-shaped eyes. Jonathan's pupils, you can, like, see the whole pupil, but, like, Dio's pupils, they're, like, partially hidden by the shape of his eyes, which I think is really cool. Like, even on a subconscious level, you can see that, oh, these two characters are pretty different. And I also like the little detail about Dio's pupils and how they're partially hidden, because like it kind of alludes to the fact that he doesn't really show what he's thinking, because like he's thinking, oh, I'm gonna take the Joestar fortune from Jonathan because he's good at it and I hate him for that, just because he's so much of a hater. But he doesn't tell anyone because he's smart, and there's like a lot that he just doesn't say, and the pupils of his eyes allude to that. Moving on, I've talked about that a lot. So we got Danny coming up. Pant. Danny, I'll introduce you. His name's Danny. Yada, yada, yada. We get to that one panel where Dio kicks Danny. And every time I see this, I am just trying to figure out how the anatomy is supposed to work. And it doesn't help, because in the anime, they basically just redraw this panel. They barely animate it. And it's like, what? Like, it looks like it's Dio's left leg kicking up against Danny, but like the rest of Dio's body looks like it's really far back. It's like he's really stretching his left leg out quite a ways to get to Danny. It just looks really weird. There's also this face of Jonathan's that just looks super awkward right under that panel, and it always gets me every time. But yeah, he's like, "What are you doing? I'll never forgive you." And Dio's like, so this is the Joestar kid, huh? Well, I'm gonna be normal, and I'm gonna torture him to the brink psychologically and take his place as the heir to the Joestar estate. And that's the first chapter. So overall, I feel like it does a really good job at introducing you to these two main characters, giving you a general idea how they tick as people, and it also shows the main conflict of the part starting to blossom. It gives you a good idea of what is going to go on. Like, sure, there's barely any vampire stuff, but even beyond the vampire stuff later on in this story, the conflict between Jonathan and Dio has always been like a sibling rivalry thing. Like even at the end of the part when Jonathan's got hormone and he's gonna hormone the shit out of Dio, like there's beneath that there's all this family drama, and there's the fact that Dio killed George, and Jonathan's mad about that because this guy who he's lived with as his brother is just being evil, and he knows he has to stop him, but at the same time he's his brother, and all that jazz. But yeah, I think it's a pretty good introduction to the part. You get to see some good stuff, and yeah. Let's see, how long have I been recording? Oh, like half an hour, okay. So, yeah, I guess this recording lasted a bit longer than I anticipated. But whatever. Yeah, I guess I'll see you in the next one. Tomorrow maybe. That'll be good. Yeah.